Alleluia, 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 alleluia.
This is my own, my beloved, on whom my faith rests.
Listen to him. Alleluia, alleluia, alleluia.
May Christ be with you.
And also with you.
A reading from the Good News according to Mark.
Glory to you, Christ.
Jesus took Peter, James, and his brother John and led them up a high mountain apart by himself. And he was transfigured before them, and his clothes became dazzling white, such as no fuller on earth could bleach them. Then Elijah appeared to them along with Moses, and they were conversing with Jesus. Then Peter said to Jesus in reply, Rabbi, it is good that we are here. Let us make 3 tents, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah. He hardly knew what to say. They were so terrible. Then a cloud came, casting a shadow over them. From the cloud came a voice. This is my beloved Son. Listen to him. Suddenly, looking around, they no longer saw anyone but Jesus alone with them. As they were coming down the mountain, he charged them not to relate what they had seen to anyone, except when the Son of Man had risen from the dead. So they kept the matter to themselves, questioning what rising from the dead meant. The good news of Christ Jesus.
Praise to you, Lord.
Transfiguration, wow. What a thing to preach on and what a responsibility to do. And it was wondering through prayer, what is this going to look like? And so always going when I'm in confusion, what is transfiguration? How do we look at transfiguration? Because transfiguration is not transformation. Transfiguration, in the definition, says a complete change of form or appearance into a more beautiful or spiritual state. It is a revelation of an unseen or unknown reality. How do we explain this? How is this explained in our contemporary world? And at the risk of minimizing the event, I'll go colloquial. It's like Clark Kent, and we realize he is now Superman. Doesn't change who Clark Kent was before, but that revelation of seeing in the uniform or seeing in the costume that he has, it's like, oh, that's Superman. We're seeing Jesus, everything that has happened up until this point, he hasn't changed. The transfiguration doesn't change him. It reveals who Jesus is. Jesus is God. And this transfiguration is in the synoptic gospels. We see it in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, but we don't see it in John. And I think there's a reason for that. in the Synoptic Gospels, we do see Jesus more in his human form, who is God as a human. And then we have this revelation, well, this person as a human is God with all the actions that are there. Whereas in John, the divine story is there straight from chapter 1. So it kind of makes sense that we would have this in the Synoptics and not necessarily in the Gospel of John. But you can definitely read other theologians' perspectives on this. But I do think that there is a sense that goes with this revelation of this person who walks with us, who is like us, is God. What is important, I also think, is what happens right before this event. What is Jesus telling to his disciples? And here's what he says in quote, "If anyone wants to come to me, he must deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. For whoever wants to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake and for the gospel will save it." He then continues, "What does it profit a person to gain the whole world, yet forfeit one's soul? Or what can a person give in exchange for one's soul? If anyone is ashamed of me and my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, the Son of Humanity will also be ashamed of him when he comes in glory with the holy angels." Well, if we're listening to this as the apostles, it's like, what does this really mean? And these are just words, but then we have this. He takes Peter, James, and John with him for this thing. If you want to follow me, do what I am saying to do. Don't deny me. And now I'm going to reveal to you, this is who I am. So I think it's important to look at, what does Jesus do before this transfiguration? What is his story? What do we know? And before this, Jesus heals. Jesus gives parables. Jesus says, turn the other cheek. Jesus calms storms. He feeds multitudes of people. He walks on water. He gives his apostles the power to heal. Real interesting of the power that he gave. It was a power to heal. It was not a power to condemn. It was not a power of destruction. It was not a power to put people in their place. It was a power to heal. And now we see this is God. Peter, as always, doesn't quite get it. He sees Jesus conversing with Moses and Elijah, and his first thought is, oh, we're somebody like Moses and Elijah. Okay, this is our part of the history. And so he goes, let's go build a tent. Hey, we'll do this for you, Jesus and the rest. And then it's revealed to him, and there is the voice that comes down. Listen to him. This is my chosen man. And when he hears that, everybody's gone, except Jesus and the three. And there is no doubt anymore. I have revealed to you, Jesus says, who I am. This is who I am. Who is he? He gives to the poor. God heals the sick. You turn the other cheek. And power is for good. What happens after the transfiguration? More of the same. Jesus continues to heal, gives to the poor, heals the sick, still gives parables. Power is for good. But it's in a different context for his apostles now, because now they have the realization, I'm now seeing what I saw before this transfiguration, but what I'm seeing now is with the knowledge that this is God. This is not just another prophet coming. This is not just another way of revealing. This is God, and it has more of a significance. I think it's then important to focus on what are those miracles and what is in Jesus' miracle that should be important for us to consider. And I'll tell you, when I was really contemplating on it this week, I had some epiphanies, some revelations as well. Jesus' miracles and the miracles that he gave the apostles power to do never changes the free will of humanity. There's healing, but there's not a changing of the free will. Even if that free will is for evil, it's allowed to happen. I've often even preached before that I could never understand why Jesus didn't do something about what was happening to John the Baptist. When he's hearing about John the Baptist and knowing of what's going to happen, he continues on with the ministry. And then he allows it to happen because Jesus doesn't change, or Jesus' miracles is not to change anybody's free will. And that's allowed to happen. The healing comes after evil has happened or in an evil situation, and that's where the healing is. With that in mind, I'm reminded of the story where Jesus is saving the adulterous woman from being stoned to death. The miracle there isn't with Jesus. And in fact, it's a time where Jesus, in a sense, is having faith in humanity, that words and words alone will change the mind and thought and action of the people around. Because there is no indication in that when he says, be first to cast the stone, you who are free of sin, be first to cast the stone. He didn't stop them for what they were going to do. He had the faith that they were going to stop themselves. And they did. And in this really kind of twist, we're seeing that within the gospel, why does Jesus love us so much? Because we have that ability to also love. We have that ability to also look at ourselves and maybe change the actions we are going to do without it being some type of magic. Power is for good. It makes me also think of how do we explain when Jesus goes to the temple and he brings up the whips and he's telling people to get away and he's showing his anger. Something that has been actually brought out of people who've been so offended by what happened in the Olympics with the supposed scene of the Last Supper just absolutely disrespecting Christianity, which is so unfortunate that that happened. But I'm looking at it, let's just say for argument's sake, that that's exactly what was intended by those who created it. What would Jesus have done? And you've seen people say, well, Jesus has righteous anger when he brings out the whips and what have you. But when we see it in the context of how he did that, Jesus was not angered there because he was offended by what was being done to him. He was offended by what was being done to the poor. He was offended by how the merchants were taking advantage of the poorest in the area for their monetary gain. That was his anger. He wasn't offended for himself. He wasn't offended for himself when he went through crucifixion. That wasn't an offense that he had for himself. He let that happen. Turn the other cheek was definitely and totally there. So what is this telling us? What is this transfiguration telling us? It's telling us, I'm not having any secrets before you anymore. The secret is revealed. I am God, and God says love one another. God says be good to the poor. God says be fair. God says power is not destruction. And now that this secret is revealed, choose what you want to do with this information. And then the apostles, in that whole scene, as they are talking to each other, and Jesus leaves with the thing of being raised from the dead, and they start talking to one another about what does that mean? What does it mean to be raised from the dead? A philosophical discussion, I'm sure, ensued. We're not given what that discussion was. We have not been privy to that conversation. So let us have that conversation. What does it mean to be raised from the dead? What does it mean in the light of the transfiguration?